Hi, I'm Natalie Nidham, your host, and we are back with another fantastic episode, this time focusing on muscle health and longevity and some tools to get you there. Now, if you ever wonder why some 80-year-olds still crush it at the gym, while we have 70-year-olds who are struggling to climb the stairs, my guest, Dr. Brad Currier, has some answers for us. He's a muscle and aging researcher and the chief scientist at Timeline Nutrition. And his work focuses on how the mitochondria inside our cells age, and most importantly, what we can do to help to reverse that decline. Now, when we're done with this conversation, you may just feel the urge to get your hands on some of the Timeline Mitopure. If you do, you know that you can get it either in capsules or in delicious gummies that are my favorite. You can head over to timeline.com/nat20 and use code nat20 to get 20% off your purchase. Now, this episode is also brought to you by Trank Dart by Wizard Sciences, their new amazing sleep formula, Tromune by Prescriptions, and Nature's Marvels Bioregulators, all with special offers just for you. Check out the show notes below for details and enjoy the show. Welcome to the show, Brad Currier. It is a pleasure to have you here today.
Thanks so much for having me, Nat. Really looking forward to speaking today.
Likewise. And, you know, the new face of Timeline. So here we are. And a fellow Canadian and a fellow Torontonian to boot.
That's right.
That's exciting. That's always fun. Even though you've defected and gone to Lausanne, Switzerland, which I have to say, I think I would do the exact same.
Well, you know, it's been amazing so far, and the door's always open if ever you find yourself on this side of the pond to stop by and pay us a visit.
I would love to. I might take you up on that someday. Thank you. Okay, so today we're talking mitophagy.
Yes.
Really. So this is going to be another episode on, I think mitochondria at this stage of the game, we could probably say are the favorite organelle worldwide, because every time I post something about mitochondria, everything explodes. Everybody's interested. Everybody wants to know about it. So we're talking mitochondria and mitophagy, and I'd love to take you back to the first time, you know, you kind of came across this term mitophagy. So, you know, what kind of clicked for you? Like what was happening in the lab or your life that made you think, oh my God, I really need to pay attention to this?
Yeah, you're right. It's a unique term. You know, a lot of people have heard of the mitochondria. You think of maybe high school biology, powerhouse of the cell. But mitophagy is a unique word. And really, you can break it down. So in the mitophagy, mito, yes, the mitochondria, but the phagy, that comes from the word autophagy, which is just the cell's, mechanisms of breaking down and recycling cellular waste. So mitophagy is just the selective breakdown of dysfunctional mitochondria. And I think I came across it when I was getting deeper into my PhD work, looking at how at the cellular level, particularly muscle changes as we age. And, you know, everything in our body, we're always making new proteins, new tissues, and we're also breaking them down. But one of the things that's really evident with aging is that this turnover slows down. And in a lot of cases, it can be because of dysfunctional autophagy or breakdown. So if people have heard of the hallmarks of aging, you know, one of those is dysregulated macroautophagy, which just means our body gets a little bit worse at breaking down parts of our cells that are damaged. So mitophagy, obviously the mitochondria is important for energy and many other things that we might get into. But as dysfunctional mitochondria accumulate with age, we need to be able to break them down, but we're less capable of doing that. And so mitophagy was a really intriguing process to see if we can maybe kickstart this recycling system that we need as we age well.
Yeah. How do you see it play out? Because you've worked with elite athletes, like you started out in the sports world and now you've moved into the longevity space.
Yes.
And how do you see mitophagy kind of play out differently in these two populations? Because I would imagine and I think one of the things that is important for us to all keep in mind on is it's not just that you have dysfunctional mitochondria, it's that it inhibits the birth, if you will, the biogenesis of new mitochondria. So you end up with a bunch of grumpy old men sitting around doing nothing good, and there's no chairs left for new guys to come in and do the work.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I guess maybe just comparing the elite athletes to the rest of us average folks as we're aging.
Yeah. Yeah.
A way to think about athletes, and maybe this will come up with some of the work we talk about, but they're just highly refined machines. They've got a lot of the same physiology that us mere mortals do, but it's just really refined systems. And that turnover that slows with aging, it's elevated by things like exercise. So these athletes' bodies are constantly in a state of renewal. And so that's a pretty big difference as it relates to something like mitophagy when you're looking at that elite population. So it is playing a role there. They're constantly turning over and recycling these mitochondria with their training, with their competition, almost to a point where they're a unique case in that the overtraining can be a bit more of an issue for the athletes, though that is the exact opposite of the issue 99% of our population has, where we're not getting any exercise. And so we need to stimulate that turnover a little bit more.
We might even have to split the older population into two groups, because we have the group that are fitness oriented, that they got the memo. They're like, oh my God, if I don't keep using it, I'm going to lose it. And if I want to age well, I need to exercise. And then you have a sedentary population. And I think what's really interesting about the studies we're going to talk about today is they cover different types of populations. And it's interesting to me that even in athlete, when you study, and some of your more recent studies were done on high performance athletes, you're still seeing a bump in performance when giving them Urolithin A, which you wouldn't necessarily expect, right? Because of what you just said.
Yeah, it is. When you get that finely tuned athlete, can kind of have both ways where, to take a phrase from my old mentor, Stu Phillips' book, exercise is like wringing out a wet cloth. That first wring you give it, a lot of water comes out. And that's what, exercise does for a lot of us. A little bit goes a long way. But these athletes have been bringing out this cloth, 3, 4, 5 times. There's only a couple little drops. And so one, it can take a lot more to have an effect in these athletes, but also it's a refined system. And you're absolutely right, where the older or aging active individuals, we can call them master athletes, where these are people who have decades and decades of training history experience. They have, whether it be the muscle, the cardiovascular fitness, in mitochondria function, you have there's studies showing 70, 80-year-old master athletes with the muscle health and other systems health equivalent to that of their 25, 30-year-old counterparts. So exercise over time. Whether it be the quality of muscle, so how much force they can produce per amount of muscle, the mitochondria function, content, it all is incredibly preserved just simply with exercise throughout the lifespan. And you're right, we'll get into the studies with Mitopure, because it really originated the interest from the folks at Timeline. It originated in targeting health span, right? It's not just longevity or lifespan. It's not just about living longer. It's about spending more time in good health. And so really the muscle is a central part of that. And a lot of it started around the sarcopenia type population. But as the promising results were shown there and continue to be replicated by others around the world, people are curious and they say, a lot of the work done now, probably at least 80% of the work on Mitopure is done by independent investigators that have nothing to do with Timeline. And, they have their own population, whether it be these elite athletes or a certain clinical population, that the benefits are expanding tremendously.
Hey folks, I just wanted to take a quick minute to tell you about something that I've created just for you guys, my listeners. I've created an amazing holiday gift guide for listeners so that you can get the best Black Friday deals on biohacking tools, supplements, and so much more. There are gifts in different price ranges and once a year price drops on your dream health tech. And no one said you can't shop for yourself. So you can get the stuff for friends and family or for yourself. All you've got to do is go to natnidham.com/gift guide for the list of Black Friday deals that you just can't miss. Urolithin A as a compound is really fascinating. And I remember way back when you guys first came out, the big thing was the pomegranate juice test. And it was about, testing, do you have the microbiome, the gut microbiome that can convert the compounds in pomegranate juice into urolithin A, which brings up the topic of, where it comes from, our ability to make it ourselves in the microbiome. So, why we don't make enough of it. So maybe you want to speak to that a little bit, because people, certainly in my audience, people are always saying, okay, well, this sounds really interesting, Nat, but can we do this naturally? Like, is there something I could be doing or eating or something that would help me to upregulate my endogenous production of urolithin A?
Yep, absolutely. And so we can break that down right from the start. And maybe just for clarity, so people have it, Mitopure is just the quality tested FDA GRAS version of urolithin A. So Mitopure, urolithin A, Mitopure is the urolithin A in this space. But what urolithin A is a postbiotic. So exactly as you described, that means that when we eat certain foods, our gut microbiome will transform the components of that food into different metabolites. So when we eat things like a pomegranate or nuts or berries that are rich in a type of polyphenol we call L-argitannins, it'll convert that L-argitannin into urolithin A, release it into circulation. It has its benefits. Now, urolithin A, as it's converted, that was one of the first questions. It's one, okay, is urolithin A, can we just make it naturally? And so that was a study that the team at Timeline had done, now I guess almost extending back for like 8-10 years, when they had first discovered and looking at if it's useful in humans. You establish the safety of urolithin A, which it checks all across the board, extremely safe. It is a natural molecule. But then second, looking at, okay, can we make this naturally? And I'm a big proponent, not sure about you, maybe the same, but food first whenever you get the chance. The list of supplements that are effective, it's a short list. So can we get this from natural sources? And this was a study done, perhaps Anurag mentioned it last time he was on, but they did it all around the world, where they would take these people ranging from 20 to 80 years old. And what these people would do on one day, they'd have a glass of pomegranate juice, which is very rich in those L-argitannins. And over the next 72 hours, monitor how much urolithin A was in their blood. They would give a washout period and then repeat that, but with a Mitopure supplement. And really what they saw was that less than 30% of people on average can produce a meaningful amount of urolithin A. And in parts like North America, so Canada, the US, this number is actually closer to 12 or 13%. So the vast majority of people cannot produce this naturally. And that was really then the indication that, okay, direct supplementation with Mitopure urolithin A is going to be the way to have the exposure so that it can have these benefits. And really what that is speaks to our microbiome health. It's probably no surprise to anyone that gut microbiome health isn't the greatest, at least particularly in the Western world. And is that something that we can change? Certainly our environment, our lifestyles impact our microbiome health. And I won't claim to be anything, any extreme expert in the microbiome area. So deferring to people who are much better or much more well-versed in that space than me. One of the leading thoughts in that field is that the microbiome is really seeded in the first 1,000 days of life. And so as we go through life, we might be able to nudge it one way or the other in terms of a little improvements. We can definitely harm our microbiome. But really that first 1,000 days of life, couple years, is when a lot of our microbiome is seeded. And it can be, there aren't any clinically proven methods to really overhaul our microbiome. So if you're a producer, great, you're a unicorn, you're one of the lucky ones. But for most people, it's going to be tough to have a really drastic impact on our microbiome.
Yeah. Well, I guess it also comes down to what are the bugs that are actually converting that ellagic acid into urolithin A. And there are endless ways that we've developed as humans to mess up that population of bugs in the gut. And so, I think that certainly if we change our nutrition, if we change our lifestyle, if we make meaningful changes in our lives, we can probably we've started to see ways that we can possibly help to shift that microbiome, but I don't know that you would have to actually identify which are the actual species and bugs that are responsible for converting the ellagic acid over to urolithin A. Where did they go? Do you still have them? And can you bring them back? And that might be more work than it's worth, really. But always a worthy venture.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was actually something that the team here had done. So in those studies where they were looking at the pomegranate juice versus the Mitopure supplementation, trying to identify, they do this thing called shotgun sequencing of the microbiome. So with, stool or other biological samples, you can process these at a really hot, deep level. And they're trying to figure out exactly that, what is the composition of the microbiome for these people that can convert the ellagic acid in pomegranate juice into urolithin A. Mm-hmm. And it's an ongoing research question. Research is 2 words. It's free and search. You find something, you have to
and again.
Get the answer, replicate it. It's an iterative process. But one of the really, I would say, all that can be said with confidence is that the richness and the diversity are the 2 components of the microbiome that was characteristic of these producers. Now, that's not saying much. It's a pretty broad stroke. But that is because of just how complex the microbiome is, right? Like you're saying, there are billions and billions of species that are beneficial for our health. And to precisely nail down which one, it's an ongoing and yet to be answered research question. But I'll be sure.
We're looking for Waldo.
Yeah, exactly. We'll be sure to know when something is found.
What's really key here is this idea of postbiotic versus prebiotic. Yeah. And it's a very important distinction to make, because what Timeline has discovered in their research is that, because it doesn't always work out that way, but in this case, you're able to provide the pot of gold, if you will. You're able to provide the output you're looking for and have it used by the body in the way that it's intended to be used. And so this whole idea of, optimizing our mitochondrial health as a final outcome, I think is so critically important, because there's nothing that we talk about that doesn't hinge on the mitochondria. We're going to talk about physical performance today, which is crucial, again, as we age.
Yes.
And so I think we already maybe mentioned that if we don't get rid of the old mitochondria, the body's not going to produce new mitochondria. Do you want to kind of lean into that a little bit? Because you've probably studied that in much greater depth than what I just said.
No, it's brilliant. You're right on the money. And so the mitochondria, yes, powerhouse of the cell. We know it makes energy. Mitochondria, a few key things I would just highlight for people listening is that one, the mitochondria they produce the vast majority of cellular energy. About 90%, we'll say, of our energy for our cells is produced by the mitochondria. And the mitochondria are in every cell in our body, except red blood cells. But so all of our cells, which make up our organs and tissues, it's powered by the mitochondria. And the energy is just one part of what mitochondria do. They have a huge role in other parts of the, health and physiology. As you know, with your physiology background, they do a lot more than just produce energy. And that's a rabbit hole.
Well, why don't we list a couple?
Yeah.
Well, we can list a couple of those things like nutrient sensing and Yeah,
exactly. So like redox, balance. So kind of managing oxidative species within our cells, calcium control, calcium handling, we would call it, which is a major signaling ion in our cells in a muscle, for example, like muscle contraction. Calcium plays a huge role in that. And regulating these levels of calcium or redox species are huge parts of what the mitochondria do for our cell health. And I think actually a good example of this, or a good illustration, is more so to look at when things go wrong. Right. So you're exactly right, where it is nutrient sensing. Everything we eat, the mitochondria convert the food we eat into chemical energy for our body to use. Right. So everything we're eating is pretty well going through the mitochondria before we have the energy that we can use from our food. So everything's running through the mitochondria. And when we look at cases where the mitochondria might be compromised. I love a guy's work named Gerald Shulman. He's a great researcher out of the US. And he does a really nice job of showing that when mitochondria start to dysfunction, it has a negative impact on things like insulin sensitivity. And that the mitochondria, the damaged mitochondria accumulate. This impacts signaling kind of on it's called the IRS1 axis, but essentially the connection between the outside of our cells where insulin says, okay, take up the sugar, and the inside of the cell. This gets broken down by things that come from dysfunctional mitochondria. And so you see these links between mitochondrial dysfunction and some of the major diseases in our society, like type 2 diabetes or cardiovascular disease. So you can really see that when the mitochondria gets out of whack, so does our health. And the original question of why is mitophagy so important? Well, we need to be able to clear these damaged mitochondria, not just in muscle, but in all of our cells. And that's what's really unique about Mitopure. So to pick up maybe where we were earlier, that, okay, we eat it, it's great, it goes into circulation, does its beneficial things. Well, what are those beneficial things? So Mitopure or Urolithin A, what it does is it stimulates that mitophagy process. So whether we have just the normal day-to-day accumulation of dysfunctional mitochondria that happens to us all, it's normal, parts of our cells age, it really is that stimulating factor that can help us increase the breakdown of those dysfunctional mitochondria. And mitochondria you can think of in three phases. There's that mitophagy breakdown phase, but exactly like you said, there's the mitochondrial biogenesis, so the creation of new mitochondria. And then there's one in the middle, which is the efficiency of mitochondria. And these are through processes that we call fusion and fission. But really, mitochondria, we can make more of them, we can make our existing ones better, and we can break down the bad ones. And this is a cycle. So when we make new mitochondria, we can optimize them with these fusion and fission processes. And then when they are at the end of the mitochondrial life, they need to be broken down. And that breakdown of mitochondria, actually, there are cellular mechanisms that feed in and stimulate mitochondrial biogenesis. So Mitopure is the only clinically validated natural molecule that'll stimulate that mitophagy process. And in doing so, and we see that in some of the earlier, more cell kind of deep probing work, that there's actually an upregulation of mitochondrial biogenesis. So by targeting mitophagy, we're not just getting rid of mitochondria, we're really improving that turnover of all mitochondria.
So you're stimulating biogenesis at the same mitochondrial biogenesis at the same time.
Yeah, it's all a feedback loop. Like much.
By pushing the mitophagy, that as a chain reaction kind of enables the production of new mitochondria.
Yeah, exactly. So they're all feed forward loops where it's cool. Kind of a symphony network where, there's very few, if anything, in physiology where you can do one thing and it has one impact only. There's always a ripple effect, and that, it's kind of if a butterfly flaps its wings. And what happens in this is that the process is all slowing down. And by targeting that mitophagy bit with Mitopure, we can kind of get the whole process up, back, and moving. It
is amazing, as you just said, that you've got such a targeted molecule that does this one thing. It's actually quite a humble molecule. It says, all I do is this one thing. All the other things, there's other people, there's other molecules that are going to help with oxidative stress. There's other molecules that are going to help with whatever the case may be. I have one job and one job only. And that's kind of a neat thing. I mean, it makes it very easy to understand. So let's talk a little bit about some of the studies. The first one that came out really when Timeline introduced Urolithin A to the world from a consumer basis, was that one done on middle-aged, overweight adults. And I think that that's a really interesting population, right? Because when we're middle-aged and overweight, and I'm guessing they were probably sedentary when they started, we were naturally losing muscle as we age. And as we lose muscle, we're losing, obviously, mitochondria. We're losing mitochondria in the whole body. But I love the elegance of this study because it went in to say, okay, well, we can't necessarily measure other systems as easily and as clearly as we can physical fitness, physical performance. Yeah. So do you want to talk a little bit about that one? Like, we'll just review it quickly because you have a couple of others that have come out since then. But
absolutely.
What was the big reveal, and what were the surprises?
Yeah, so I will highlight actually the one study before it, which was published in Nature Metabolism, basically just showing that Urolithin A is bioavailable, it's safe across the age range.
Right.
And so that was, kind of a phase 1 study, we would call it.
Lay down the groundwork, yes.
It's been working great in animals. Is it okay to give to humans? Yes, it is across the board.
Yeah.
You're right. Yeah. So this paper, which published in Cell Reports Medicine, I guess in 2022, so almost 4 years ago, but you're exactly right. This took middle-aged, slightly overweight adults, and it is, you're right, misrepresentative to maybe call that. Really, these are average adults, 40 to 65 years old, BMI 25 to 35, low physical fitness. Yeah. So their VO2 was below a certain threshold, but that threshold basically just removes those master athletes we were talking about. So it's saying, all right. Compared to the population, normal BMI.
Joe Blow on the street. Yeah.
Exactly. And so what these people did, they changed nothing in their life, no changes in exercise, diet, and they were randomized to either a group that consumed a placebo, 500 milligrams of Mitopure, or 1 gram of Mitopure. And they took this for 4 months. And you're right, we looked at physical fitness. Function is one of the most important parts of aging well, and keeping that muscle health, that performance. Really, I don't think it's a stretch to call muscle. I think a few people have started using it more, the longevity organ. It is central to healthy aging. So really what we did at each of these time points, baseline, after 2 months, and after 4 months, measured a wide range of physical fitness, as well as taking muscle biopsies to see what's happening at a molecular level. And
that's pleasant.
Participants are forever indebted to participants in all research. And really, the major takeaways from that were, the main one was that strength. So looking at our leg strength, this increased in the groups that were taking Mitopure, 10 to 12% after just the 4 months compared to the placebo group. Wow. So there was, no change, a little worsening in the placebo group as you'd expect, but to actually just see muscle strength improving from simply adding a supplement, it's pretty unique. And that was a major takeaway here. There were a couple other results, like a VO2 max, which is a great test of overall cardiorespiratory, cardiovascular fitness and health. You do see an improvement in that group taking the 1 gram. It was off the top of my head. I'd have to check the exact percentage, but somewhere in that, kind of 15%. I think it was about 4 mils per kg per minute, which is a clinically meaningful amount.
That's not insignificant.
Yeah. So, but really the main thing there in that study was just by not changing anything in these people's lives, adding Mitopure, there was this significant improvement in muscle strength, which really I would say is more important even than muscle mass in a lot of respects as we're aging, because the strength is, that's the foundation of us being able to move and just function in everyday society.
Well, and not fall, right? Yeah. And balance. Like, as the population ages, you have more issues with falling. Falling has more dire consequences in an aging population than it does in a younger population. So whatever we can do to improve that strength is going to impact everything else. So at the 1 gram, was the improvement in the leg strength the same at the 500 milligram and the 1 gram dose, do you think?
Yeah, so it wasn't different. In the 500 milligram group, it was like 11.2% or maybe 10.6%, and the 1 gram, it was 9.8%. So they were basically the same. So and that was actually lined up quite well with what we'd seen in that phase 1 safety study, where at 500 milligrams, that's where you start to see that rejuvenating of mitochondria and improved cellular health. But from that 500 milligram dose, it plateaus a bit to a gram. There's a little bit more benefit. It happens a bit quicker, but then after a gram, there's no added benefit. So seeing this kind of, 500 is that what we consider a clinically minimum dose to have an effect.
Yeah. It's like your threshold dose, really, right?
Yeah. Up to a gram still benefits. And, that's been studied a lot with a whole host of other benefits at the 1 gram dose. But beyond 1 gram, there really wasn't a benefit, an added benefit, I should say. So it really does plateau, as we see with so many interventions. There is that saturating and plateau of the effect. But you're right.
So the 500 grams really is, it's really all you really need, especially if you're taking it consistently. So were there other mitochondrial biomarkers, like inflammatory markers, anything else that kind of moved in the study? Or was there anything else that shifted?
Yeah, there were. And you're reading my mind, or I think we're on the same page, because that was one of the first studies that was measuring something called C-reactive protein, or CRP, which is a kind of staple marker of inflammation. Any clinical blood chemistry panel, you'll be looking at CRP. And one that maybe we won't get into as much as we go down the athlete route, but as we've continued to study these middle-aged, older, and just aging individuals, one of the most common results that we see is this reduction in C-reactive protein and kind of this anti-inflammatory effect. I think that was actually probably a big feature of your last conversation with our Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Anurag Singh, and how Mitopure in this most recent clinical trial on the immune health was really showing that there is a reduction in that inflammaging, that we see that chronic low-grade inflammation, and really a revival of an aging immune system. The kind of that aging fatigue or immune fitness was really improving with Mitopure. And
if it's doing that to mitochondria in the muscle, we have mitochondria. You started off by saying we have mitochondria in every cell other than red blood cells and every system. So is it doing the same thing everywhere else? And I think that's where, when, the first podcast I recorded with Dr. Singh, we probably talked about, that 2022 study really. And then the next one was about the immune system to help to drive home the message that this is not just a one-trick monkey. If you look at fertility, I'm sure one day there'll be a study that comes out that talks about how Urolithin A is helpful for fertility because the ovaries and the testes are so densely populated with mitochondria. And when we see mitochondrial function there, it's going to have obviously an impact on fertility.
Most dense, if I'm not mistaken, most dense, most concentrated area of mitochondria in the human body. So absolutely have an impact. And I think that's what's really exciting when you get something like Mitopure, that you're not targeting, one specific area of physiology. When you actually go and target something like aging at the cellular level by targeting the mitochondria, that'll have widespread impact in so many different types of tissue. Yes, muscle is important, and it was easy to study in those first few trials, but mitochondria are everywhere, like you said. So by targeting these processes at the cellular source, we'll have those impact elsewhere. And what we're really excited about right now is kind of building on those pillars of aging, where yes, muscle is certainly one. Immune is another massively important one. And so that human trial will be out. It was just accepted, but it'll be public any day now in Nature Aging, one of the top aging journals in the world. So credit to the team who is all doing that work. But another huge one is, brain, skin. And the skin, we just started our 11th clinical trial, obviously a lot there with, it's one interaction between our body and the external environment. So that's hugely important. And then brain, we actually have right now ongoing the largest trial on cognition with nutritional supplements. So we have 650 people taking this Mitopure. And we're measuring cognition before and after a couple months of using it. So that trial is ongoing now, but really trying to look at, by targeting the mitochondria with Mitopure, where are all the benefits? Because muscle's definitely one, immune, skin, but there are, some really important hallmarks or pillars, I should say, of aging that we should be thinking about.
100%. So when you say that it helps to lower inflammation, is that just purely by, I mean, I don't know if you know the mechanism of action there, but is it possible that it's just from eliminating those, I guess they're almost senescent mitochondria, right? That are producing, not able to deal with the oxidative stress and maybe producing more inflammatory molecules and just pushing them out into the environment. Is that?
No, I think you're right on track with that, where, yes, those oxidative species that as a mitochondria, it's that energy factory, like a nuclear plant, if you want, as it kind of falls out of shape, as it's not doing so well, that's going to stimulate a little immune response. And certainly that's a plausible way where Mitopure, by removing the damaged mitochondria, could be having, an impact on this inflammation. We see that reduction in, that chronic low-grade inflammation, those markers like CRP, regularly seeing that now in several, every trial we measure it pretty well, you see it going down significantly.
Wow.
And
that's
these
a big
are people
deal.
again where it's elevated, right? So, most people, you take a 40, 50, 60, 70-year-old who's inactive, there'll be some of that chronic low-grade inflammation. And if Mitopure is helping, support a healthy immune system by doing that, then that's great. But certainly the targeting the mitochondria is one mechanism. We're diving a bit deeper in with this, some of these ongoing studies to get an idea biologically how it's actually working. So it's a plausible way for sure. And that's going to be continued refined by us and other scientists around the world.
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's an interesting point that you have, and Dr. Singh mentioned this, like there's other labs out there doing the research, going, calling you guys up and saying, how would you feel about us studying Urolithin A and whatever their area of specialty is, and which is exciting, right? Because it means you've got a compound on your hands that is worthy. It's not just a let's make some money molecule. It's more like, what are all the different things that can be impacted by this one thing?
A group of scientists, I'd like to say, that accidentally stumbled into something that was promising. And, it's scientists first above all else at a timeline going to be driven by that. But you're right. I mean, like last year, there were over 100 publications on Urolithin A. Timeline does, and now maybe I would say at most 15 or 20% of the research you see published, and probably not even half that. Most of the research is being done by other independent investigators. And it's neat to invoke excitement for sure. But even cooler, I would say, would be to have people replicate or extend these results. And I know one of the studies we might get into with weightlifters is one in that space where, it was a very happy surprise.
Yeah, it's up next. So this is where, again, like we talked about this earlier, I'm like, but wait a minute, how does it, if we're talking about people who are exercising and stimulating their own mitophagy, and yet you're still able to get a lift from the supplement. So let's talk about the Weightlifter study. So this is a more recent study, and these were already trained. And you guys, somebody decided, I don't know if it was you, somebody decided, they decided, what happens if? Wait, that's what happened. Let's talk about that.
This was a pleasant surprise to the whole Timeline crew, it was done by one of the top sports science institutes in China, like you were saying, and this was published last year, 2024. And they took these really well-trained weightlifters, so people who had been lifting for 2, 3, 4+ years, young, healthy. It was just males in this study, but it was this really specific population, early 20s, highly trained. And they had these people just continue their training program for 2 months, and they were randomized to either take Mitopure or a placebo supplement. And without changing anything else in that, the two main endpoints they saw were that one, leg strength, again, significantly improved. And this was a knee extension test on something called a Biodex. So it was one where it's not what people are doing day in, day out to train. It was just a completely naive test of strength. And the other thing they saw was what we call a repetitions to failure test, which is basically just you take a submaximal weight, usually about 70% of your max strength, and you see how many times you can lift it. So the number of repetitions that these people could do to fatigue significantly improved in the Mitopure group, as did the leg strength measure. So that was really neat. And as you mentioned, that was a surprise. They are completely independent of timeline. They quite literally just went and bought the product and ran the study in the lab.
I love that.
Obviously, that was before my time at Timeline. So I'm sure there's a story there, but that was really neat to see that in that population, especially when mitochondria and strength, it's not always intuitive, but mitochondria, we think endurance, maybe, energy, and certainly, yes, but also strength. And that's one I would say in the muscle physiology world is increasingly appreciated just in the last 2-3 years, is how important mitochondrial health is when strength is important. Like muscle is a very energetically demanding tissue.
But I want to go back to something you said. So when you said the knee extension, which leg extensions are my least favorite exercise. They start to burn after about 2 or 3 reps, no matter how much I do them. But does that mean that in that 2 months, they basically did a baseline and then they did the next test after and just kept training normally in between?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah, because I think that's an important point to make, because if you do the same exercise for 2 months, you're naturally going to improve your performance on that exercise, right? Yeah. And so these are really the reps to failure and the leg extension or knee extension. Yeah. These are really these are benchmarks that if you're in, I lift and we have benchmark days where you repeat something. Yeah. Either a month or 2 months or 3 months later. And they're always crappy days, but they're instructive. Is the training that you're doing effective?
No, you're absolutely right. And so the two things really that, yes, this strength is more than just muscle mass, and specificity is a key principle when we talk about strength. A huge element of getting stronger is just practice, right? There's an element, yes, of building muscle, making more high quality muscle, but practice. And there have been numerous trials done. I mean, Brad Schoenfeld out of New York, Brooklyn there has done a lot of work on this. And really it's been reflected in guidelines for training now. So having that naive test really shows that it's not just an element of practice, but even if it was, there's a placebo group. So the training is controlled with these groups. So yes, it's a naive test, but it's also different compared to a placebo group. So those are the two ways that these researchers kind of countered or mitigated any bias from practice.
Yeah, that makes sense. Is there a distinction to be made here between, or do you know, is Mitopure, are the effects of the Urolithin A helping people to generate more force, or is there a piece of that where it may be supporting faster recovery?
Yeah,
because recovery is a big deal, right? In how well you're able to perform.
Yeah, and I think it's a little bit of both. So strength is not just the amount of muscle. We have nerves that are turning on that muscle. Our nervous system is rich with mitochondria. So if we're improving mitochondrial health,
it's important.
Yeah, right. So if we're improving mitochondrial health in our neurological system, that could have an impact on strength, but also recovery, which, and maybe that's where we can go now. One of the other studies that was just published last month was led by one of the best in the world sports researchers named Louise Burke. And Jamie Whitfield is the lead on this project, both fantastic researchers. Actually, Jamie's Canadian too, Guelph. So he works down in Australia.
Look at us.
Louise.
Representing.
But what they did, go back now, I guess 2-3 years ago, going into one of the upcoming Olympic cycles, they took these elite, middle distance runners. So these were people who you have well-trained, you have professional, and you have elite. And these were, some of the best when it came to this middle distance running. And they took this group and during one of their high altitude training camps, so 4 weeks, just about 4 weeks, what they had is, again, people randomized to either Mitopure or placebo. And before and at the beginning and at the end of this training camp, they did a time trial race. And one of the big things they saw is that after the supplementation period, a key marker of muscle damage called creatine kinase was significantly lower in the Mitopure group. So it's suggesting that there might be, improved recovery. And that's one that we're now just starting to explore deeper. But that was a really intriguing finding, that this main marker of muscle damage, we're seeing much less of it after Mitopure supplementation. And obviously exercise is taxing. We need to be able to recover. These athletes also had significantly lower perceived exertion during the time trial. So while their performance, didn't worsen, didn't improve significantly, it was much less taxing on them, and they've recovered a lot quicker, seemingly. So that's something that it's quite intriguing, and there are more, like any research, there's more layers to be peeled back and uncovered.
Yeah, just more questions. Always more questions. For the average person who's using Urolithin A for all these purposes, will they feel it? Like, will it mean less muscle soreness, or maybe better sleep, or they wake up in the morning more like, readier for the next workout? Like, we're talking about recovery here, and recovery between workouts is a big deal, because that's ultimately what allows you to, like, how often you can recover. And for someone like me, like, I'm genetically at a disadvantage. Like, from a genetic perspective, I don't recover as fast between workouts. So if you're going purely on my genetics, I should take at least a day, if not two, in between workouts, which makes me crazy. But I have found over the last little while, and both with Urolithin A that I've now been using for a couple of years, and a couple of other tools in my arsenal, it's all about, can we manage the oxidative stress and lower the bar? But for the average person who's just starting Mitopure, might they notice after a couple of months?
Yeah, what are you going to feel? Yeah, so I guess I would say just two things, and maybe one to kind of preface it. I'll be true to the science. What is there clinical data on, and how people feel? What are those unique responses? That isn't something that we've actually clinically rigorously studied and said, okay, what do people feel when they take this? We do have a study ongoing right now where it is exactly that. In that that brain study, that's one of the things we're trying to get an idea of. What are people's perceptions on how this is impacting them? Because that study, actually, that's a 25th clinical trial that Timeline alone has done, let alone everyone else. So there's dozens of trials showing where it's efficacious biologically, but that doesn't necessarily mean we're going to feel something, right? Because it's not a stimulant like caffeine, where you take it and you feel it. So how do we monitor that? We don't have clinical data yet. It's coming, but some of the most common pieces of feedback, I'm lucky enough to go around, every really couple times a month, whether it be North America or around Europe, to speak at these conferences and actually talk and hear how people's experience have been. And some of the most common ones are, one, improved sleep quality. They do recover faster from their workouts. And personally, that's what I've noticed, is that from my training session, I do recover quicker. I'm less sore in the days following a hard training session. And for me, with the traveling, actually, that's something where jet lag hasn't been a problem since I've been on it, which was a pleasant surprise. But yeah, people really talking about feeling that they don't have that, brain fog kind of, kind of mental block or low energy. I would say that's what people feel. So we don't have clinical data on that to say, oh, you can expect to feel this. But those are a couple of the things that people do regularly, anecdotally comment, but clinical data to come. And I will shout out, so the whole skin side of it was because largely of consumer feedback. So all the skin products during those early trials, like that middle-aged, adults who are slightly overweight, you have people saying, okay, I'm feeling stronger, feeling more energized, but my skin looks a lot better. And perhaps a story for, that could be
another day
series in itself, but that was actually what sparked the idea. Okay, let's look at topical applications of Mitopure, because there's mitochondria through our skin. So it is, it's unique, and we'll have some clinical data to actually talk about what people can expect soon here, hopefully.
So a lot of the people who listen to this podcast are taking things like protein, all kinds of protein, essential amino acids. They're taking creatine, they're taking collagen to support their training. So where does Mitopure fit in there?
Great question.
Is it something that you take before, after, just daily? I personally think of it as a foundational supplement, but
Yeah.
you're the expert. What are your
Yeah, it
thoughts on
is.
that?
It's helping that cellular foundation of our body. One, on timing, we've actually studied that. So morning, afternoon, fasted, fed, same equivalent, like bioequivalent. So you get the same amount of it no matter what time, or if you're fasted or fed while you're taking it. And same with the benefit. The life of Mitopure, Urolithin A in the blood is actually right about 24 hours. So anytime in the day,
perfect.
My advice is just whatever time you're going to remember, like anything, whether it be exercise, maybe practicing guitar, if you're learning guitar, whatever, consistency is most important. And so having that time of day that you're going to regularly remember to take it. For me, that's first thing in the morning. I've got it right there.
Mm-hmm.
A supplement list is short. A multivitamin, creatine, Mitopure. I would say is the daily stack.
That's one of the shortest stacks I've ever heard. Yeah.
Those I would say are my foundational, make sure all my boxes are checked. And really the Mitopure and creatine, to your point about things like protein, I think that it's important to realize that supplements serve two purposes. One, they're either replacing a deficit, so something we're not eating enough of, where protein shakes can be very helpful if you have an individual where it's tough to eat the volume of food they would need to get enough protein. Protein shake can be helpful to get their daily limit without, maybe chewing's tough. Maybe they don't want to eat that volume of food. You can replace a deficit. Though I will highlight with protein, the vast majority of adults are eating enough protein. They are
or not?
They are, actually. And I think it's a bit of a surprise where the adults as a whole, I'm sure you were talking about sarcopenia, like you're well familiar with the literature around the RDA, 0.8 grams per kilo. That's insufficient. It's not optimal. People should be eating more.
Yeah.
But the average protein intake, for adults really around the world, thousands of people, the data points on it, most people are eating about 1.2, 1.3, which is what experts recommend. It's when people get older that they maybe struggle to chew, they don't eat enough, that their protein intake then dips. Particularly aging females, actually, it dips a lot where they're not even meeting the RDA. So in a case like that, protein supplementation can help replace that deficit. But a lot of times, if it's just a nutrient like that, we can get it through food from the most people. There are the few exceptions where actually having something beyond what we can get in food is helpful. So things like creatine or Mitopure, we're attaining a benefit that we're not able to get from food alone. And there are a few cases like that, right? Where it's not a super physiological, it's almost a super nutritional benefit. Mm-hmm. There isn't a way for people to get that much creatine or get that much urolithin A just from diet alone.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we kind of beat that. We covered that earlier, right? Making it in our guts is a bit of a challenge. So let's talk about the last study, the performance in active people study that you guys ran. And so this is a newer study. It's runners who were taking Mitopure. They took it for a few weeks. So in terms of how they responded, was it more about the recovery or raw performance? What did you guys observe with these? I mean, going back to that recovery versus performance, in that case, what did you observe in the study versus placebo?
Yeah, so that one, it was really the main thing was recovery. These were, again, runners, like very well trained. Performance in that case, there was no significant improvement. You see maybe a trend, but it wasn't significant, the change in performance. The recovery metrics were significantly different between the Mitopure and placebo group. And obviously, there was a short study, only a few week training camp. So maybe if that's played out longer, do you see a difference? Perhaps, we don't know. But back to what we started this with, athletes are, especially those high level athletes, this really fine-tuned machine. You can make these little tweaks that can have a benefit, perhaps on recovery, or even just that perceived effort that they saw lowered. That can be huge if this is your livelihood. But actually moving performance, that is one where I think what they did, I saw someone frame it the one way. The difference in performance between the placebo group and the Mitopure group was not statistically significant, but it was the difference between qualifying for the Olympics and winning gold in the sprint race. The idea of just trying to show that there is a very, very small margin between victory and losing in these elite sports.
In the metric suite that are accepted in scientific studies, it would be considered insignificant. And yet for an elite athlete, it would be very significant, is what you're basically saying. So if someone's training regularly, maybe not an elite athlete, just Joe Blow, and they were going, and even an athlete actually, we think about training cycles, right? So we have cycles where we're pushing for results. Then we have a cycle where we may be in more of a recovery cycle. And then maybe somebody's, kind of taking the season off, although hopefully they're still exercising and doing something. Would there be a cadence to your Mitopure there, or would you advocate for taking it every day?
So daily. That's how I take it. I don't see any research. There's no data that would compel me to think there's a benefit to cycling. Even messing around with times of the day, morning, evening, splitting it throughout. Actually, that Weightlifter study, they took half in the morning, half in the evening. It's effective across it all. Mitopure, because it's something that we wouldn't typically be exposed to, there's no kind of plateauing effect, where we might want to cycle it. I think that's something that you see with other supplements. It's kind of being realized, like creatine, you don't need to cycle it to have the same effect. You just want to keep that level elevated so that you're constantly at that spot where you can have the benefits of it. So no, I don't think it should be cycled, whether you're, average Joe or Jane, or the, finely tuned athlete that you've got your micro, meso, macro cycles. Like you do not need to be trying to line this up with any training volumes or whatever. That 500 milligrams to a gram dose is the sweet spot in all of these cases.
Let's talk briefly now, how long do people need to supplement with Urolithin A before they could expect to start to experience results?
Yeah, great question. So, and really that's something that we've looked at in the studies where initially it was, one dose, it's in the blood. That first main study was 1 month, so 4 weeks. That was where we saw that molecular signature in the muscle biopsies of that rejuvenating mitochondria, improved cellular health. So 1 month is the time for those cellular benefits. And then with continued use, those translate into actual functional benefits at the 2 and 4 month, where these studies we've been talking about with improved strength, improvements in physical function, like a 6-minute walk test, those clinically meaningful differences. We see those after 2 and more months of use. So 1 month for the cell, 2+ for the actual clinical efficacy.
What we were saying earlier, because dose is a big question. So 500 milligrams, we were saying earlier, you said earlier, probably the threshold dose for most people. 1 gram if you want to go crazy, but anything above that is going to be kind of
plateaus.
wasted,
and
almost.
So it's kind of funny when you see the knockoffs advertising like 3-4 grams. We've done the clinical studies. There's no benefits of more. So 500 to make sure you're getting the benefits, and then that's fully saturated at 1 gram.
I wonder if you might do 1 gram, when we were talking about different phases of training, if you might bump it up to 1 gram when you're in a heavier training phase, and then go back down to the more,
you can
more of a maintenance dose.
Yeah, you can for sure. And I know that's something anecdotally, again, people have told me that if they're feeling a little sick or they've got a big, training session or transatlantic flight, they'll go up to 1 gram. Just as many athletes, I would say, and I would say actually most of the athletes that use Mitopure just take 1 gram. That's the
steadily
dose. Yeah, it's just 1 gram.
Yeah. If you could design your magic study, what would be the next study you could design? Design. Money was no object. What would be the study?
That is a very good question. I'm really intrigued about this recovery component because I think that is something that you see not just in a performance. Certainly there's benefit to better understanding how the mitochondria is implicated and how Mitopure could benefit recovery. You see that in the athletic bit where if you can shorten recovery times, people can play more games, they can train harder the next session, benefits there. But I think more so from a healthy aging perspective, that's one of the biggest barriers to whether it be exercise or just function in daily life, soreness takes longer to recover. And so that part of the cell renewal that's stemming from the mitochondria, I think my next dream study would be having something really diving deep on the recovery bit and putting all the bells and whistles on it, from the biopsies, the performance, the MRIs, to the tracers, to really have an idea as a physiologist, actually running the study to see, okay, we see the effects at the physical level, but what is the one little mechanism that's causing it? I think that would be my dream study at this time.
Yeah, no, that sounds amazing. Yeah, getting down into the nitty gritty. I was actually wondering also if something like grip strength might change over time.
Yeah,
which would be a really interesting thing for people to measure. You could probably do it yourself at home. Start taking your Mitopure 2 to 4 months later.
Yeah.
Get one of those grip strength. Well, I mean, test your grip strength first and then do it again at 2 to 4 months.
Yeah, you can.
I think that would be really interesting.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. In grip strength, I mean, hundreds of thousands of people worth of data. So the epidemiological field it's riddled with the easiest kind of field-based way to measure strength. And I would say, yeah, it is one that there's a lot of helpful insights that have come from it. A lot of people might have an orthopedic limitation. I thought I was a hero on my mountain bike when I was a kid. So the grip strength is a little bit lower on one, because I was, a dumb 14-year-old that didn't do the right rehab. And some people too, they'll have that more orthopedic limitation that could deflate their grip strength score. But across the board, population level, it's a great way to measure strength and trends. Of course, if someone's willing and able, I would always push going to the gym, whether that be actual weights or even just body weight work. Strength is much more than just the grip, although it's a great, extremely valuable.
But it is a longevity. Yeah, it is a longevity marker, right? Like grip strength, 6-minute walk, all those, sit to stand, those kind of boring things. So you've spent years looking at mitochondria and aging. What's something you used to believe about how our cells age that you've changed your mind about?
How our cells age.
or anything that you've really changed your mind about, like something that you really... or, a concept that you were like, this is this. And now after doing what you do, you're like, guess what? I was wrong about that.
I think one, maybe it's just because it's fresh on mind and we're talking about training in sports. As you mentioned, my background originally was as an athlete and getting into, biochemistry, exercise science. I was always obsessed with finding that perfect training program. So whether it was at that time as an athlete, but then as starting to work with more general population or older adults, what is the perfect exercise prescription? And that was something that I've changed drastically on in terms of you have all your prescription variables. They are, there's no shortage of them. But then what I found over the last couple of years of some of the research I was doing through my PhD, which actually culminated in writing it'll be out soon, but the American College of Sports Medicine's new position stand on exercise prescription for resistance training, is that because so few people do exercise, less than a quarter of our population meets the guidelines for resistance training, aerobic training, that the impact of just doing something is so profound when it comes to just healthy aging, living well. I think that was one for my first few years in the training and athlete space. I was obsessed with the perfect program. And now as I've shifted to how can we help the most amount of people live the best quality life, just realizing that anything is better than nothing when it comes to exercise. If that's a chair stand for them, if it's a wall push-up, band work, and there's so many ways that they can have a tremendous impact on their life just by exercise. And the perfect prescription is only relevant for a very, 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 very small portion of people. So I think that would be probably over the last couple of years, like philosophically or just interest-wise, what I've changed the most on, because exercise is the best lifestyle thing we can do for aging well, in my opinion. And that would be, I would say, that one of the biggest shifts I've had in terms of my my thoughts around it, where it's not a perfect program. It's just anything.
Yeah, anything is going to work.
You'll do regularly.
Do something. Yeah. Well, anything you'll stick to. And I think the idea of exercise snacks comes in. I mean, it's becoming more of a thing. And I mean, the first time I heard about exercise snacks was a few years ago on a podcast. And this concept that you could do 20 air squats every hour, or 5 push-ups, even if they were wall push-ups, or 10 push-ups, depending on where your fitness level is. And this idea that, no matter where you are in your fitness journey, whether you're just starting after however many decades of being sedentary, or you're an athlete who's now stuck behind a desk, what that exercise snack is going to look like is going to change, but the impact of the exercise snack on you is going to be significant, no matter who and what it is.
Massive. And I showed it to John Little, actually, at UBC Okanagan. They did a great study. I thought it was so cool. They took middle-aged adults working in an office, and all they did for, I think it was 6 weeks. But when they came into the office at lunchtime, and then when they went home, they did 3 flights of stairs kind of rapidly. So they do it in, less than a minute, right? Just less than a minute of those 3 times every other day for 6 weeks. Clinically meaningful improvements in VO2. So I think the exact amount was 4 or 5 mils per kg, which for reference, you have half that, your risk of cardiovascular disease goes down by 13%.
Wow.
And then just by adding that, which I thought was incredible. And I know they have a longer trial ongoing now, I think in collaboration with Marty Gabala, looking at also the glucose handling components of that. So exercise snacks, really anything is better than nothing.
The message there is it's those stupid things that people dismiss, right? Take the stairs instead of the elevator. Park further away from your destination so you have more of a walk. Like all of those silly little things do add up and become meaningful. Okay, let's do a couple of quick fire questions and we can all go on and go find our Mitopure. For me, it's my Mitopure gummies. They're my snack.
Amazing.
I save them usually in the afternoon. If I'm looking for something sweet, I'll just go and have my Mitopure gummies and it makes me happy.
Sugar-free, and to have that.
The what?
I don't know how.
Oh my God! Right? I mean, they're the best.
It's incredible.
They're the best. And there was one show. I think I must have gone by the booth 10 times in a day. And Ian was killing himself laughing. I'm like, I'll just have a couple more. Anyway, let's put to bed the myth. Can you just eat pomegranates and make enough urolithin A? And these are quick fire, so super fast.
No.
Thank you.
I can expand, but no.
No, you don't need to, because you got to listen to the podcast.
Okay.
Is Mitopure just another antioxidant in disguise?
No, it's targeting the root of what's causing these oxidative species.
Perfect. At the mitochondria.
The mitochondria.
Is it really only for elite athletes?
Not at all. It started with helping people age, and that is the still primary focus. Increase health span, quality of life above all else.
Love it. Should you be able to feel it working within 1 week?
Probably not. When we're starting at the cellular level, it's going to take a few weeks to really rewire our biology in that way and fix the mitochondria. Like we said, 2 months is when you start seeing the clinical benefits of improved strength and other metrics.
Love it. Brad, you've been amazing. Thank you so much for your time. We have a special offer for the audience. You can go to timeline.com/NAT20 and use code NAT20 to get 20% off your purchase. But Brad, where can people find more about the research that you guys are doing? I mean, I don't know if you have your own profile on Instagram or anywhere else, but why don't we let people know how to learn more?
Absolutely. So actually on the socials, timeline.com is just the company website where we have a whole section dedicated to the science. So you can see work that's been done, studies that are ongoing, really what we're doing there. Our creative team is doing an awesome job revamping that to show now the up to 25 clinical trials that we've done. And so, showcasing that work there. On Instagram, Timeline Longevity and Timeline Skin are the 2 main accounts to check out. Personally, my Instagram will be following in the scientific realm in next year, 2026. You'll find Brad on Instagram.
All right.
Timeline
That's the project.
Yeah, that's my growth. It doesn't come naturally. So the social media is one I've realized this year doing more. I need to get a bit more of a presence there. So I'll be building that one.
Okay, well, this was a really great conversation, Brad. Thank you so much for taking the time, and have fun hiking in the mountains of Switzerland. I'm a little jealous.
Well, thank you, Nat. And I don't know when this is dropping, but enjoy Jays Mayhem right now as Toronto takes on LA in the World Series.
Blue Jays.
Yeah.
Are you following that? I mean, the timing of the games for you is brutal.
No, they start at 1 a.m., but I watch the highlights. I don't look at my phone, and I just put on the highlights in the morning. So I get a 10-minute, surprise game.
I love it. I love it. I think this will come out probably still within that window. When you become the most popular kid on the block, people want to start copying you. And so there's a lot of generic Urolithin A products out there. Can you tell us a little bit about how they might be different from what people are getting when they're buying Mitopure versus a generic?
Yeah, and I would say not just differences, but concerns, primarily safety and efficacy. So Mitopure, like we talked about, it's rigorously gone through that clinical development. It has been reviewed by the FDA to get the generally regarded as safe approval for use in foods and all of that. And other jurisdictions around the world, it's been rigorously tested from the manufacturing process to the packaging to how it's delivered. A lot of these knockoffs don't. And, we've tested some where they have no Urolithin A in them in a lot of cases.
Oh, you're kidding. And
so what I would say is Mitopure, it's the one clinically tested, known, safe, high quality brand. So if you're looking for Urolithin A, Mitopure is really the one. It's the exact one that's been used in clinical studies. It's the one that's undergone all the safety testing. And I think that's my concern just from a person's well-being, is that it's a wild, wild west, especially in North America with what you can do supplement wise. If it's not Urolithin A in these things, which it isn't in a lot of cases, I don't know what's in there. So the third party testing is a huge emphasis now that all the safety approvals have been authorized for Mitopure, is that it's independent labs and boards doing this. So things like NSF certified for sport, clean label project. These are actual third parties who, unbeknownst to us a lot of time, test the product to confirm that it's safe, it meets the label claims. So you're actually getting the amount of Urolithin A that's advertised. And then it's fine to be marketed as it is. Perfect. Love it. Thank you. Thanks for that little extra bit, because we'll use that. Okay, Brad, have a great afternoon. Have a good one. All right, take care.